my way through this. It's for some reason I've just had a little bit of a rough time with this, but the title of it is Kings and Priests. And I'll be looking down. I write out most of my information, and I'm not going to comment much, and I'll probably get through maybe just a little early. We'll see. The first resurrection of the righteous. So just in case you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, because you may be either new to the faith, I mean there's a lot of young people here and that sort of thing, or for some reason, you don't know that there's more than one resurrection of the dead, that we find in the book of Revelation 20. Revelation 20 is where they're listed. And they're listed in verses 5 and 6, which I'll go into in a little bit. And I want to start out by reading these two particular verses that makes this whole thing a little bit more clear. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to reverse the verses. I'm going to speak about Revelation 20 verse 6 first, and then Revelation 25, and then I'll try to help clarify it, because it really is some of the most important things that we need to know about the future. So I'm going to read Revelation 20 verse 6. I'm reading out primarily out of the World English Bible, so it may be slightly different than what you've got. So Revelation 20 verse 6 says, "Blessed and holy is he who has part," they, and I'll go into some details about he and she as I go along in this message here. But blessed and holy is he that has part in the first resurrection. Well, first of all, when it says first, that implies a second, at least, a second or more. So, he who has part in the first resurrection, over these, the second death, which so many people out in Christianity have no clue what that means. They've never even heard of it, many of them. But over these, the second death has no power, but they will be priests of Yahweh and of Messiah, and will reign with him for 1,000 years. In verse 5 it says, "The rest of the dead did not live again until the 1,000 years were finished." So it clearly states in verse 6 that blessed and holy is he who has part in the first resurrection. This is the focus of what I'm going to be talking about. To be born a second time in the first resurrection from the dead. All die. All die, one way or another. Even those that are at the end of the age, they will be changed, but their physical body is going to disappear. It's going to die. And so, when people die, consciousness is gone. Their body will deteriorate. Goes back. It may be like a model of DNA or something or other. It's basically everything that you are and everything that you experience and everything that you know. I don't know how it works. But anyway, there will be a resurrection of the dead in the future. And, Yahshua came to save the world. Everybody that ever lived, as it said in the passages I just read, that the dead will be raised again. They're either going to be raised physically or spiritually. And our goal is to be raised in a spirit way, in the spirit body. Our goal as believers is to strive to be born a second time in this first resurrection from the dead. And I have to admit that most of Christianity, and I've had a chance through the internet to really spend a lot of time with people that are coming out of Christianity and trying to do a lot of searching and understand what the Bible is really talking about. And most people don't understand really what all this means. They really don't understand the future and what is Yahweh's plan. Hebrews 9 verse 27. I'm going to read this. I just want to give you these verses so that you want to write it down or something, you can look at it later. Hebrews 9 verse 27, "Inasmuch as it is appointed once for men to die once. After this, the judgment. Well, that judgment will be in a resurrection. So Messiah also, having been once offered to bear the sins of many, will appear a second time without sin to those who are eagerly awaiting him for salvation. So, to it, which is I'm going to go into here in this message here. So the question I want to bring up is this. In the future, through our Father and through the teachings of Yahshua from the Bible, all the information is there. And how we have applied all of what we've learned and what appears to in the Bible to our own lives as fleshly human beings. I mean, we study this book, and the more we study it, the more we learn. Be by the grace or the favor of our Heavenly Father Yahweh. He's actually the decision maker. You know, just for the fact that how many people are here or attend the Feast of Tabernacles worldwide, either by the right calendar or the home calendar. Master, are there few who are saved? Then he said to them in verse 24, strive to enter in by the narrow gate, for many, I tell you, will seek to enter in and will not be able, because it's narrow is the gate. For many, I tell you, will seek to enter in and will not be able. And also in Matthew 7, verse 13. And broad is the way that leads to destruction. I think that destruction may be a little bit of a heady term, but in other words, they missed the mark. It's not going to happen to them. The way. So, the one that's restricted, the one that leads to life, the one that many seek and few find, at least in this present age. So what is one of the greatest things that Yahweh has in store for us? What's written? It says, and I saw a book on the right of him sitting on the throne, written inside, sealed with 7 seals. And I, nor under the earth, was able to open the book and look at it. In other words, nobody could look at it. And I wept very much. This is or even look at it. Do not weep. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has prevailed to open the book and to loose the 7 seals of it. And I saw in the midst of the throne of the 4 living creatures, and amidst the elders of the vision that he's having, a lamb stood, as if it had been slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are of the spirits of Yahweh, sent forth into all the earth. And apparently through this analogy here, for lack of a better way to put it, is how the heavenly realm. And when he had taken the book, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders, which I really do not know who these 24 elders are. I have to admit that. I just don't know. I've studied it. Having harps and golden vials full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. In other words, they're involved with our prayers, apparently. And they sang a new song, saying, you are worthy to take the book and to open its seals, for you have scattered everywhere, all over the earth. You know, little book until the time of the end. And I've been thinking about that for a long time, and I finally figured out what book it is. That book is sealed. You have it in your hand. That book was not available. The scriptures were available in the form of scrolls that the early believers would use. There wasn't anything but the scriptures. All of the epistles and the writings were for what we call the New Testament were not available. to the early church and for quite a long time. As a matter of fact, the Bible was not even available. They came out with the King James Version in 1611, but still, the knowledge that we have in this room here did not come until that we have today, that we now can understand it. Just a fascinating thought that crossed my mind on through our early part of our life. And to govern people, but the Bible indicates a nation. You know, it's called a kingdom, and it's ruled by a sovereign. The king is definitely a monarch. He is basically Mr. Big. No one messes with the king. Now we know that in the future, all things have been given by Yahweh, our Father, into the hands of Yeshua, our Messiah, and that he's in the position of King of Kings. You know, Daniel gives us a clue to how we will be trained to take on the responsibility of kings. And I want to go back to, I mentioned Daniel, the 2nd chapter, that was in verse 4, but now I want to go to verse 21. There's so much in Daniel. For Daniel 12. He reveals the deep things, deep and secret things. He knows what's in the darkness and in the light, and dwells with him. You know, a good king knows what's really going on in a kingdom.
Where are you, Bob?
What's the question?
Where are you at?
Okay. Well, that's all I had there with those two. Artaxerxes and Nebuchadnezzar. But Yahweh is, in this particular same way, as king over kings of this future world that we're talking about, when he returns to put down when these kings come about. So I want to go to Revelation 19, discuss this just a little. Oh, a white horse. And he sitting on him was called Faithful and True. And righteousness, he judges and makes war. And he had been clothed, verse 14. And the armies of heaven followed him on white garments, and on his thigh a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Master of Masters, Lord of Lords. In the sense that it's written, I have no problem with that. Revelation 19, verse 17 says, And I saw one angel standing in the sun, and he cried with a great voice, saying to all the birds that fly amidst heaven, Come and gather together to the supper of the great great Elohim, so that you may eat the flesh of kings, and the flesh of commanders, and the flesh of strong ones, and the flesh of horses, and those sitting on them, and the flesh of all, both free and slave, small and great. In other words, it's a terrible time he's speaking about here. When we come to realize that the term King of Kings, you know, it takes on a greater meaning for all of us as all this unfolds in the future. You know, is that we will be put in a position of king. Us as individuals right here in this room. And we will have Yahshua as our king, who is king over all. But in the future, we will find that, you know, we've entered into the kingdom through this narrow gate that he speaks of in Matthew. And we will also have the title of king. And Yahshua will be king over these kings. So I've actually gone over this. It's been years ago, but I went over this in the past, and I began to want to note in Micah chapter 4, there is a rather peculiar statement that very few of us have read or really understand, what it's trying to say. And I want to go through this. It's in Micah 4, verse 1, where it talks about the latter days. Micah 4, verse 1. It says, "But in the latter days it will happen that the mountain of Yahweh's temple will be established on top of the mountain, and it will be exalted above the hills, and being to it, and we will walk in his path. For out of Zion will go forth the law." Very strict at that. "And the word of Yahweh from Jerusalem. And he will judge between many peoples, and will decide concerning strong nations afar off. And they will beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not lift up sword against nation in this time, neither will they learn war anymore." That many times led by their kings. "So neither will they learn war anymore, but they shall sit every man under his vine and under his fig tree, and no one will make them afraid. For the mouth of Yahweh of hosts has spoken. Indeed, all the nations may walk in the name of their mighty one, but we will walk in the name of Yahweh, our mighty ones, forever." People of the individual nations will walk in the name of their Elohim, or their mighty ones, their king. So who are these Elohim? And why are they not all of them not walking in the same name of Yahweh? Or of Yahshua alone? Yahshua. Wow, but ultimately that's the goal. We will be like him. So we will be the Elohim of the future, the tribulation and the day of Yahweh, and where it says, "And made them kings and priests to our Elohim, and they reign on the earth." So it's all about this future. It's in Revelation 3 verse 9. I want to go just for one verse. Revelation 3 verse 9. It says, "Behold, I give yourself," and I think we should in this life, this future. This explains what's going to happen. Any longer. They are equal to angels, actually, and are sons of Yahweh. Different makeup. With whatever Yahshua changed, we're going to be like Yahshua, as we read in 1 John 3 verse 2. And so, if we're like him, then I think ultimately down the way, instead of raising children as such, we will have the ability to create. I'm just dreaming at a time beyond more than that. I don't know. We see through a dark glass. It's hard to actually understand perfectly about the responsibilities of a king. The king is sovereign. The king is the master over his subjects. Life and death are in the hands of the king. And I like to say that, nobody messes with the king. I've said that before. The king be able to judge in this manner. I don't know what it's going to be like, but I'm just going to be learning the will of our Father, Yahweh, from the Bible, so that we can. The age is just ahead. I don't think we're very far from it, quite frankly. I mean, in the great scheme of things. I don't think we have hundreds of years more to go before the king does. A lot of things, they've gone nuts. We'll have to wait and see. We're going to have to live through it all. So we're going to have the strength. We're going to have to depend on Yahweh. We're going to have to depend on his protection. And boiling oil on him or